In this series, I would like to talk about how we can transfer data between Blender to Alias, but also then from Alias back to Blender. Imagine a scenario where you did your work in Blender or parts of it, you brought it over to Alias, and then you realize you might need to change something inside Blender. Uh, and you can change parts, for example, in Alias and bring that back into Blender. So you have a three-dimensional blueprint. At the same time, for example, let's say you build an object in Alias and then a certain shape is very difficult to build. You can export that polygon or that NURBS model from Alias as a polygon model into Blender, use it as a 3D backdrop, sculpt the part or the shell that's difficult to make in Alias in Blender, and then through Maya bring then that shape back into Alias as a NURBS surface. And for that, of course, the position and scale of your 3D models is very important. So just as a quick run through, again, I'm using metric. Z is up, X is my front vector, so I'm in front view, and my objects have all the scale applied with object apply scale and rotation. And then I'm going to select both objects, file, export, wavefront, select only. I turn off the modifier and the rest. I'm not using a mirror modifier, I'm using a subdivision surface modifier, which I don't want to bake. My scale I have to set to 100. Forward is X and up is Z. And I'm on the desktop, and then I can export it. Then let's go to Maya. Here I'm going to import those computer models, select them, and then as before, modify, convert polygons to subdivision surface, convert subdivision surface to NURBS, and then export what I have selected, everything or select all. And I'm going to select IGES and then call this one shells. Maya maybe, so I know what IGES is what. Click export. Maya is going to work for a moment to write that NURBS file. In the meantime, I can go to Alias, go to File, Import, go to my desktop, and then here is my IGES file from Maya. Click Open, and Maya is retrieving that Alias file. Takes a second, and there it is. And let's go into Front View and Orthographic. Let's zoom in a little bit, and my grid is not in the right scale. So let's go to the grid menu. And I would like this to be 10 millimeters. So I have one cube is 1 centimeter. Click go, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 6. So the scale is correct. And let's say, well, maybe this part scale-wise doesn't really fit well, so maybe I would like to change this. So let's just assume we need to change this part. So I'm going to maybe, let's say I move it up a little bit. Okay, and let's say maybe it's a little bit too small. And yeah, for this I have to reset my pivot point a little bit so the work will be easier. So I'm setting it to there, and then scale, because now I'm scaling in object mode, not in edit mode. So let's say maybe something like this, and I might have to move it in a notch and maybe move it down a little bit. Yeah, let's say something like this is okay. So I would need to now bring what I have selected back into Blender, so I can use that as a blueprint reference. So with this object selected, I can go to File, Export, and then say Active As, and I'm going to click on the menu button first. I'm selecting OBJ, and I would like, in my case, this to be in centimeters. And when I bring it from Alias into Blender, I could, for example, either type in here scale factor. I think 0.01 might be right. Tessellation you want to have turned on. So I click Save. And then let's say this is camera alias scaled. And if you don't want to do this all the time then in alias, you could also simply, for example, leave the scale factor as 1. And then let's go to Blender. And in here, I'm going to import wavefront OBJ. For example, here's my scaled version. I have to set this again. So forward is X and up is Z. Click import. And you see that with 0.01, the scale factor perfectly fits. And if I go to import OBJ, this one, so that is not the scaled one, you see that it's not there, but actually it is there. It is just pretty big. So here I would have to type in scale 0.01, click enter, zoom in, and you see that it got positioned exactly at the same place where the other one. So it's up to you if you want to scale it in Blender or if you want to scale it in Alias. If you type it in Alias at once, it might be easier because you have that scale factor permanently written in. However, I rather like to do the scaling always in the host application because in case I send it to a different application, the scale factor might be different, and then from Alias, I'm exporting it already out in the wrong factor. So being here now, for example, I could use now this as a reference and say, well, I needed to scale this a little bit. And see, I sculpt over this somewhat. And then I can delete this part. And then this part I could again go export wavefront OBJ and bring it over to Maya and then Alias. But I'm not going to do this because, I mean, you saw basically what these programs or how they can change the files between the different applications. So, and you saw that also, and that's why I said don't, for example, in Blender move it to here and in Alias move it to somewhere else. When you start modeling in one application, leave your files where they are. So if you bring it over into another application, oh, wrong Blender, they all will be positioned at the world X, Y, and Z 0 with the correct positioning. So that the moving between different programs will be very easy. The only thing you might have to adjust, of course, here is the scale and the orientation, but otherwise it will always be a perfect fit, which makes then working with those files very, very easy. So that basically covered how we can bring the files between Blender to Alias and then from Alias back to Blender and vice versa. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how we then can create the shell for the rapid prototyping.